we're going to share that. It's called Native Land. Now, I'm very excited about tonight's event. This is part of VMF Winter Arts. There are partners for this event, and I'm very grateful for that. And VMF Winter Arts, for those of you who are not from Vancouver or are here in Vancouver and haven't noticed, it's an awesome festival that transforms downtown Vancouver for about 3 weeks into an open air gallery with arts and music events and all kinds of amazing stuff that connect all of us together. So I want to thank the team at Winter Arts for a phenomenal festival and also for this partnership. Now, this is the last week of the festival. So if you are in Vancouver and you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend you go out and explore it. We're going to share a link in the chat now so you can see what art pieces are, but also what kind of upcoming events are happening. So on Saturday night at the Winter Arts Hub downtown by the Art Gallery, there's a thing called Public Disco. And if you haven't been able to dance for 2 years, this is your chance to go dance with a bunch of people outside. It's really fun. I also want to thank Electronic Arts for supporting this event. Thank you, very generous. And so tonight, we're here to discuss a very crucial topic that is facing the gaming industry, which is how do we fight disruptive behavior online and build inclusive experiences for everyone? So to do that, we've invited 2 industry insiders and gaming journalists to share their perspectives on what gaming studios and what the industry and designers are doing or can do to reduce bullying and harassment online. So I'm excited to introduce today's speakers. Shannon, Colm, Vivian, can you please join me on stage? Nice. Hello,
hey.
Nice to see your faces.
Hey there.
So Vivian Hortensi is a UX and UI designer with Relic Games, and she has over 11 years of experience in digital products and about 5 years working exclusively on UX and UI for apps and games. Before Relic, she worked with Minecraft and with Marvel Champions. Now, Vivian is also an ambassador for Women in Games, which is a not-for-profit that is looking for equity and parity for all women and girls in the video games industry and esports. Wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
And then Colm Slevin is a senior director of the Positive Play Group at Electronic Arts, where he focuses on online toxicity. Previously, Colm was the media director for augmented and virtual reality at the Oculus Facebook Reality Labs, now I guess called Meta Labs. He's also worked at Lucasfilm, Telltale Games, and Ancora Imparo. Thank you for joining us, Colm.
Thanks.
And to moderate the conversation, we have reporter Shannon Liao with us. So Shannon is a games reporter for Launcher, which is the Washington Post's home for video games and esports. Previously, Shannon was a games reporter at CNN Business, where she was breaking industry scoops around business and tech. And she's also been a tech and culture reporter at The Verge, covering general tech news, Chinese internet culture, cryptocurrency, and the intersection between internet culture, gaming, and politics, which is exactly what we're here to discuss. So I'm very excited to have you all here. And I'll explain for the audience. So they're gonna have a conversation for about 40 minutes and from the audience. So prepare your questions and have something to ask, please submit it through the Q&A button. And then at the end of the event, Shannon's gonna look at the Q&A button and answer your questions. It just makes it easier for us to see your questions if they're there as opposed to in the chat. But if you must use the chat because you hate the Q&A button, that's fine, we'll manage, we'll survive. Now, please keep it very civil and respectful in the chat. I mean, it is an event about reducing toxic behavior online after all, so let's be consistent with that. And now, last thing before they start chatting, I want to remind you that after the event, the good folks from Electronic Arts are going to host an information session for those of you who are attending and are interested in working in gaming. So if you register through the VPL, we sent you the Zoom details for that to your email. But if you didn't register through the VPL, it's okay. We're going to post the details at the end here in the chat so that you can go to that Zoom event right after. Okay, I talked a lot. Let's get this conversation started. Shannon, take it away.
All right, thanks so much, Jorge. Hey, everyone. Okay, yeah,
Shannon,
please.
for whatever reason.
Oh, 1 second. 1 sec. 1 second. Oh, it's doing this again. Second. Can you hear me?
Yes. Normal.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. It's always like connecting to my phone and then connecting to my computer. Okay. Anyway, I knew this would happen. But hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm happy to be here to moderate and ask some questions. I think we can start off with everyone in the audience just keep ruminating on your questions. and we will start our conversation. I was hoping, maybe Vivian, you can kick us off with a little bit about your current job at Relic and, how that kind of relates to the topic that we have today.
So thank you for the introduction. Mostly, I work as a UX designer for a while, as you mentioned. Nowadays at Relic, I'm just started there, and I think regarding to community, Relic has a great posture that it reflects exactly what type of players we attract and what players want to stay. So I think that's the main reason that having a community that is strong and having management that is also present and vocal about positioning, it's very clear how players can relate to that and how you ended up like attracting a good community around your game and detaining a little bit this harassment behavior. Not that that doesn't occur, of course, in any place. But yeah, so I love Relic for that because the culture is very strong and it also reflects the community.
Got it. Oh, and yeah, and then same question to you, Colm. What do you do at Electronic Arts, and what does that have to do with online toxicity?
Sure. So I joined a new team called the Positive Play team back in September of 21. So I'm a relatively recent arrival to Electronic Arts, and our team is a consolidated central team that's focused on the notion of positive play. So we have an externally sort of player and customer facing charter called the Positive Play Charter that sort of underlines the commitment that the company has to players, and this team was built to make that an operational reality internally in partnership with the game teams. So like everyone, as Vivian says, when you work in game design and you're a practitioner and you're creating games, you think about the positivity of the experience that your player is going to have, and you think about that from your IP perspective and your design perspective. And at EA, what we're trying to do now is build those tools as a service for the game teams so that they can leverage all of that thinking and all of that work. But I lead a small team of very, very smart subject matter experts and people who help the game teams combat toxicity and negative behavior, but also encourage and incentivize positive behavior.
Cool. Yeah, and then a question for both of you is, as you were working in the games industry over the past several years, pretty much over a decade for both of you, and you're like doing different job positions, did you have an idea of the sense of toxicity and harassment issues in the games industry, and as you're going from job to job, did this become like a focus for you as you're working?
I can start. Not only as a focus because of lack of a diversity, and I think is a main root and issue on our industry too. That also it kind of like reflects what of the culture that we're living in, and not having this culture inside of the company of diversity inclusion. It also reflects that to the public. Since I started in gaming, I'm more engaged to drive minorities to the industry by mentoring and also creating, kind of choosing better options in design to communicate to players. Like for instance, there's there's a study made by Scientific American in 2016 that actually highlights the valid point of having having tips before the game starts that actually decrease the toxicity in games. So that's a design solution that comes to help and reinforce positive behaviors inside of gaming. But not only that, I think there is, as Colm said, there is a necessity for a robust system to back up that and provide the best solution that is also AI related, and it can kind of like walk hand to hand between design solutions and bringing diversity to games, to also offer the players this agency of taking care of like the reports and actually reinforcing and increasing reports, because the more that you flagged, the more the systems become better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm definitely not as close to the metal as you are, Vivian, in terms of of design work. My sort of journey was. It's very kind of you to say decade, but it's been like almost 40 years that I've been working in various forms of production, content creation, and game development. And when I first started out as animation and film for me was my first sort of work, my first professional work. When I started to work in games because I was a player and I loved to play, but I didn't get into game development until a little bit later. It really struck me that like here's an industry that is approaching $200 billion. It's bigger than all of the global movie industry and the North American sports industry rolled into one big, money ball. But yet it's the only industry, I think, arguably, that has this. It's not the only industry that has the problem of inclusion, obviously, and diversity. That's a global problem. But it's certainly the only content industry that has this toxicity issue and this pervasive harassment issue. And it really struck me that even though it's a sort of vanishingly small percentage of players that are truly bad actors, that they have an outsized impact on people who don't play or who only occasionally play because they're just repelled by it and scared away by it. So as an occasional gamer, for me, it was like, well, how do we make this medium more inclusive for people and more accessible for people who just want to play and have fun? Like, why does it have to be this club of this toxic club that keeps people out? So that's what sort of triggered me to get really, really interested in that too, and also some work I was doing for the last several years in VR, which as a nascent platform had its own issues of toxicity that were sort of a learning point for me. But it was definitely a process to get here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for both of you, do you feel that in your current role you're better able to kind of like find solutions, or at least try to tackle this issue of online harassment, rather than in your previous positions? Maybe you're starting to become aware of this issue over time.
Yeah, I think this type of knowledge kind of like grows. Like, of course, as Colin mentioned, you do realize that as a player, as a female player, I already suffered from online harassment in many occasions and could not play the game because if it's a multiplayer game, you get blocked and you cannot use the voice systems, or you need to hide that you're a female. So in many instances, I suffered that. And nowadays, I think finding this relationship between like I'm capable to change something and how this could be viable through the companies and solutions that nowadays exist. So it was a process. It's still a process. I think we are not like with the magical solution yet. I think there's systems that need to evolve for sure, AI mostly, especially because there's fine tuning between culture and what is trash talk, what is harassment, and that's very difficult for an AI realize. So you ended up relying in humans anyways. So we're not there yet. And for me, it is an evolution. I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to use pronouns even. Like, I think it's normal for anyone that is starting to realize that we're not inclusive before, and how we're increasing this. It's a growth, is a self-recognition, and also a matter of learning too.
Yeah, I really agree. I think, especially with your first point that there is no silver bullet, for this, it's a very multi-dimensional problem, and there's no single solution. And also, even the individual solutions are usually a hybrid of human labor plus human labor and eyeballs, and moderation, plus machine learning, plus smart technology. And there's no really simple playbook, but there's certainly no single solution. It's a process and an evolution.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we're already talking about this topic, so we can just dive right in. I'm curious, in your role, just following up with that column at EA, like how do you kind of think about tackling this issue of online harassment? Like, where do you kind of start if it's such a pervasive problem and there are so many different elements to consider?
So there's a couple of ways I think of answering that question. One is the structure of our team is built around, we have this notion of the 5 player needs that play, which are really human needs actually, but that players, in order to have a fundamentally good experience, there need to be sort of 5 qualities to their experience. It has to be safe, it has to be fair, it has to have functional social connections that aren't dangerous. It has to be, you have to have the ability to balance your time and control how much time and money you spend. You have to be aware of what that is, and it has to be inclusive. And inclusion is this big tent that includes, for us, inclusion, diversity, and representation, as well as playability and accessibility for differently abled players. So the team is structured around subject matter experts in those areas who partner with the game teams. The more important piece to me is that the way I think about an effort like this is that ultimately the players are our customers, but really the game teams are our partners and our customers. The game teams within EA is a large company with a lot of very large, effective, very smart, capable teams of game developers, and meeting them where they are to solve the problems they have for their specific communities and their specific audiences is sort of the approach we take. There isn't a single way to skin that cat for every type of game. The type of issues that Apex Legends has very different than the types of issues the Sims are going to have, or that FIFA are going to have, or NHL are going to have. It's all. There are some generic elements to it, but it's generally very customized and very targeted towards the specific need that the teams have. Ultimately, the dream for me is that we teach enough developers how to fish instead of just catching fish on their behalf, that these principles become imprinted on the game development process, and it becomes just, you think about designing inclusively in the same way as you think about designing at frame rate. It just becomes part of your day-to-day. So as a really broad and somewhat abstract description, but that's generally the way we tend to approach things. Vivian, maybe kick it over to you to talk about the specific work you do in Relic.
Yeah, not only in Relic, but I think as UX designer, we tend to, in some point, I think it's our responsibility to bring that inclusiveness to, mainly as UX design is exactly about that, about empathy, about the player, about how they're experience our creation. So we need to create that environment where they can be themselves, that they can feel safe, where people are not taken advantage of, or players are not, or like parents are not concerned with their children playing the game because they have a safe environment. So this also is a super responsibility. I think it's something that we do need to take ownership and offer better tools, offer better solutions. And in game design is exactly that, how you can increase cooperation, how you can reward better behavior. There's certain choices that can make that environment a little bit more friendly. And it's sometimes, and exactly about that, like it's inclusion, yes, so it includes accessibility. It's a main discussion nowadays for games. What we're going to have, like different levels and different play modes, or which resources you're going to provide for those players to feel they can, that you can allow themselves to feel safe and have fun with the game. So yes, so we do have to combine this issue. It's a layered issue. I cannot see just as we have a measure that is an AI, we can put the bot in there and just recognize like what is a bad behavior. That's not going to happen if you don't promote a better history. Even like if you don't create games, they're not diverse, they're going to generate hate. If you don't create like characters that are more realistic and not isolating themselves emotionally from these histories, also it prevents that these impacts come to players. So, and it doesn't change anything. So we need to take more histories and investments towards those type of stories that includes diversity, that allow players to have empathy with the character in a good sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I think both of you have made a lot of points that I would like to follow up on. But the first thing, when Colm, you were talking about how you're looking at different games like Sims and Apex, and they're all going to require different solutions. Can you kind of give a few examples or just like an example of how it would be different, a community of Sims players versus a community of Apex players, for instance? What would be different there?
Yeah, of course. Happy to. I think the thing that the way that I tend to think about this is that not only are the fundamental design mechanics and the type of fun you have with a specific type of game is different, and it can, different types of fun also means different types of toxicity and bad behavior. But the way we tend to think about this is, I think it's generally simplistic to look at this problem as a problem of malfeasance and bad actors. There certainly are those people out there, people who just want to grief and troll and use hate speech and provoke people and be hateful. Again, small percentage, but that work is a war of attrition, right? You get as smart as you can about catching them before they manifest, or as quickly as possible when they cause trouble or offense, and there are consequences for them. You deal with that. I think what is far more interesting and actually revolutionary in some ways is what Vivian was talking about, which is if you think about some of the design loops that you build, which are not remotely negative or toxic in their own right, but a good example is one we use a lot of the time is if part of the reason for toxicity is frustration and just someone reaching a boiling point of frustration because of the competitive nature of the game. If you take a game like FIFA, which is insanely popular, if I score a goal, I can force, and I'm playing against Vivian, I can force Vivian to watch a replay of that goal 3 times over. And great design element, designed to allow the player to celebrate. But the byproduct it sometimes has is it makes their opponent just angry and upset. And like, I sit here now for however many seconds just watching my failure play over and over and over again. It just makes me mad. And now suddenly I'm typing something hateful in the chat. So a lot of the work is this very nuanced thought about how design can manifest how dark patterns can emerge in design, and how to address those. Ultimately, I'm getting way off topic from your question, but I'll get back to that. Ultimately, I think the dream we all have and the goal we all have is to tip the ratio of how much time we spend on policing and doling out consequences for bad behavior. So that's a tiny percentage of what we do, and ultimately we spend most of our time building better incentives for good behavior, and as Vivian was saying, collaboration, building simple elements. So I think about a lot of things. I think about the play sessions, the duration of a play session. I think when I play a long form session of some kind, whether it's a raid in Destiny or whatever, or it's a WoW quest or something like that, I build a lot of currency and empathy with the other players, and very often those players will re-up or will connect after the game, and you'll build some currency. Very often when I play a really quick session game, it is prone to more instances of toxicity, because it's just like, you've all got a job here, we've got 40 minutes, get in, get out, and you get mad if people get mad if people aren't doing their job, or people behave badly because they're just not building currency with the other players. So I think introducing design elements like, an ability to say good game after a game, an ability to fist bump or high five before you start the game, an incentive, the tips that you mentioned, Vivian, I think you're so right. Like, I feel so I feel so gently onboarded into a game when I see a series of tips. I'm like, oh, okay, right. That's what the right D-pad button is for. You know, it really puts me at my ease, and I feel better about it. In terms of the different types of issues, really the way those manifest themselves is, you know, a quick session, super popular game, battle royale game like Apex tends to over-index on keeping players safe, reducing fairness, and tackling cheat bots and all those kinds of things. And we're working on a longer runway with them on things like building inclusive plans for inclusive characters and designs and those kinds of things. But most of their focus is on fairness and safety. Like that's the thing that shouldn't be a competitive advantage. It should just be the thing that everyone can expect, and the other pieces come later. But it's a wide variety of types of problems we tackle. But I'll stop, because otherwise I'll continue to consume the oxygen, and I want to hear what Vivian has to say, especially with the design pieces.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Vivian. I really would love to hear what you have to say about those, especially like the dark patterns that might emerge, and if you find that to be the case, and as you're thinking about user experience.
Yeah, when you think about user experience, you're dealing with a lot of bias, and bias is inherent in any culture. So if you're working and like shipping a game to different types of cultures, you also need to attend to those cultures. And it's a very well-known issue in UX, and how to deal with bias and how to convey a better environment. So with that is which tools you can provide to the players as a matter of not intrusive, not going to remove the player from flow, which is something that also we are always aiming towards. Like leaving the game to report someone is not the ideal, for instance. That's what I mean. Like, so creating tools that is easy, accessible, and not removing the player from the immersion. So also other design tools, it could be honor measure that you can have after games are played. The collective decide which player got the best ranking, or as a vote, the collective vote. You do have Riot has implementing a lot of like different solutions towards that, and it's been like called it out as a good part of in a design solution for their games, where those policies now they evaluate even players' voice to see is a very similar AI speech recognition system that is very similar to the Intel announced recently, but they evaluate the players' communications to see if there was any type of harassment or bullying, and in-game chats too. So it kind of offers more tools to players, which is not exactly, there's a lot of cons on that subject. Several factors can be just the technology. It sometimes fails because of these cultural differences. So it's very fine tuning on recognizing accents, recognizing like all this type of trash talk, if it is trash talk, if it is. So the fine tuning, it is one more tool. And regarding the design part, yes, it's implementing anything that could level players to a sense of camaraderie, of companionship. It's more like when you have a multiplayer game, reinforce those good behaviors. Like a soccer game, you shake their hands like before the players the game starts. So why not? We don't have kind of similar situation as Colin even mentioned, that reinforces that it's just a game. It's nothing else. That's play for fun. Let's respect each other. And how you build that is creating exactly situations where you can promote that. So even if it's just an award, to the other team. If it's just awarded to another player among that didn't perform that well, it also gets a prize, a certain type of prize. So it's just like incentives to those good behaviors. And as I mentioned, if the community goes hand to hand, it's just you get this boost of players that are also going to look towards to participate on that community because they know that it's safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of you are raising a very interesting question, which is one, I mean, when you mentioned Riot as an example, that's one that I'm very familiar with. I wonder if you think that it's a question of, not just like you're assuming that the average gamer is probably a good person, right? They're maybe getting angry because they're frustrated by the patterns emerging in the game and they're getting trolled by somebody else, and rather than they themselves are also a troll and then they're going to contribute to the harassment, right? So I'm wondering, so you have this kind of good faith in the community for both of you as you're thinking about designing these experiences, and I also wonder if, Colm, you had thoughts on what Vivian was saying.
Yeah, I think what Vivian is saying is spot on. I think putting the player first and thinking about the player's experience is is the mantra you hear from game developers all the time. I think the issue is, I feel like we have, first of all, like if you go back, I'm trying to remember where I read this article recently, enough to dig it out. But there was this very interesting article I read recently about the marketing slogans and the language that was first used to promote games when consoles came out, when the first wave of consoles came out. And it really embraced the notion of toxicity at the time, right, in this humorous way. And it embraced this idea that, and it would have like, I can't remember, but like some aggressive looking young teenage guy on the ad, and it would say something like, such and such wants you to play Command and Conquer so he can destroy you or humiliate you or whatever it is. And I don't know if it was Command and Conquer, so no offense. But like this punchline evolved over the years to be like this albatross, this weird albatross around the industry's neck, where it started out like, well, yeah, of course, people playing games are going to be aggressive and have poor social skills and blah, 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 blah. Not the case at all. Everybody plays games. Listen to Jane McGonigal or read Celia Hodent or human beings play games. This is not a pastime that is reserved for, trolls and aggressive members of society. And I think that the work we need to do, so much of it is about having a good defense, a good system for defense to protect people and to protect against hostility and harassment and all those things, but also protect against cheating. So a good defense is really important. Smart tools and capable moderators and people that can stay a step ahead of the bad actors. The second thing you need that I really love what you were saying, Vivian, is great communities. Like you need communities that self-regulate, that won't tolerate toxic behavior, and will encourage one another to do better and to be better. And then the last thing you need is sort of inclusion, positivity by design, to be woven into the fabric of the content that you're making and built from the ground up in that way. But I feel like we over-index on the safety and fairness, on the great defense part of it, just because it's urgent and it's important and people need to be protected, but also because the positivity by design and the community building work is sort of lagging behind, because harassment has been a problem since the advent of any kind of online community, whereas the notion of designing for inclusion it's not super new, but there's not a ton of it in academic programs yet. It's something that studios and developers are having to develop and build that muscle themselves. So it's a process. And as I finished that lengthy sentence, I realized I don't think I answered your question. because I drifted into something else. But tell me, remind me and bring me back if there's something I didn't touch.
Oh, no. I think that's great. I think that definitely goes along with what I was asking, is just, you're assuming that that the gamers that you're, a community that you're, trying to moderate and remove toxicity from is full of gamers who are trying to help each other. And then, of course, when you design these elements, you're trying to remove their frustration, right? So that's what I was trying to ask. But I think, okay, let's see. So I actually think that what you just said segues really nicely into one of the questions we got from the audience that I'm just now seeing. And I wonder if you can ask, an anonymous person was asking both of you, if you were to work on a game from the very beginning, what is the first thing you would focus on to make sure that it builds a positive environment for everyone? And yeah, I wonder if Vivian, you can start this one off.
As a UX designer, you start researching. You need to research from ground up what is good and bad about this certain game or genre that you're gonna work with, and to not commit the same mistakes. And after that, focus in accessibility work and how the UX work will be related to that game genre. And again, getting resources, involving the community, producing your game, which is something that some companies, including Relic, does. You can make the players closely to development and be a little bit more active towards what the game that you're building off, and how they ended up, like, I think, in my point of like observing that, they ended up like manage themselves amongst the community. They gonna combat those type of behaviors. And yes, choosing that. I just want to add one thing that Colin was saying. To that perspective, I think is also part of I know that it's not inherent to games, but cyberbullying laws are just starting to be implemented. And I think it's also something that the gaming industry did not see it coming, I don't think, because we don't have specific laws towards that. And once that you reinforce those laws in a society, since that we're living in a digital world too, I think it improves those type of punishments when the harassment gets to life-threatening situation, because there is situations where you can have players suffering from a very dangerous situation. So I think it also needs to go hand to hand with different laws and how the laws are being created to reinforce this interactivity between the society and the digital world.
And Colin, what would be the first thing that you would do when creating a new game to address toxicity?
Yeah, I'm really appreciative that you let Vivian go first, because that's a really hard question. I think it varies wildly depending on the genre or the type of game you're trying to build, and how, especially I think a game that is rooted in narrative. If you take a BioWare game, for instance, a game like Mass Effect or Dragon Age, which is about people and places and stories and the actions they undertake to influence the outcome of the game. There's a huge amount where you have to think about representation. You have to think about cultural appropriation. You have to think about all of the aspects of your game and who they're speaking to and who they're for. We work in a global industry, and which is still, to a large degree, it's sort of a big blockbuster driven industry. So we're just having a conversation today about talking about how different types of skins and customizations resonate differently in different cultures and in different locations. So with a game like that, I think you've got a ton of work to do, and I think Vivian said it perfectly. You start with research. You start thinking about what are we building here, and what are the things we should be aware of, and then you think about the type of talent and the type of effort you bring to bear on that problem. This is an out of our gaming ballpark example, but I'm really fascinated by the journey that Pixar took over the last 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years or so, where they veered into making culturally very authentic stories like Soul and Encanto and Luca and Coco, etc. And did that in a very intentional way, and did it by starting with the story, but then staffing the creatives to authentically represent that story. So that's something I think about a lot, and I think about how do you leverage that for interactive experiences. It's really a one-for-one when it comes to story-based experiences, but multiplayer battle royale games or soccer games or American football games are a different story, and they become much more about each of these categories necessitates a very different set of tools and approaches. You need to think about, well, what is the potential for harassment in this design here? What is the potential for unfair play in this design here? And there's a range of different things to approach there. Then are these hairstyles authentically represented? It's a bottomless rabbit hole, right? Because there is all of these areas of focus contain very deep specializations around, we've only in the last several years started to address colorblind gamers, unsighted gamers, gamers with hearing impairment, and hats off to Microsoft and the work they've done with hardware accessibility and the controllers they've built. But that kind of work is really important. So I think it starts with research, and it starts with understanding what experience you're trying to build, and then identifying like what's the worst that could happen here, like what is the worst outcome that could come from players engaging with the content, and address accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I wanted to give the audience a little bit more time to send in their final questions, but I will say one thing I wanted to ask both of you, since we are here, and there are so many recent headlines about this over the past few months, and of course Microsoft is now buying Activision Blizzard. I wanted to get both of your kind of opinions, or just overall thoughts on this this kind of massive story of Activision Blizzard being accused of workplace sexual harassment, misconduct claims, and just kind of like this sense of not just online harassment that we're talking about here, but also like internal company harassment claims that they're dealing with, and how you kind of see this impacting the industry that you work in. And maybe we can start with Vivian.
Yeah, so as I was mentioning before, it's not a new issue. It's just more popular now. People are being more vocal, and everything starts when you don't have a diversity in place, when you don't have measures to detain inside of the company those type of harassment. It's very important, and I try to do some work on that to empower minorities, and they should be applying, they should be trying, and how to break in the industry, because the more that you have diversity, the better the voices are going to be heard, and it starts inside of your company too. That's why I think this issue is not just an outside and community issue, it's also part of the company's culture. It helps a lot when you have a diverse environment, when you reinforce that you want to pursue and you want those people to grow and see leadership roles being occupied by minority as well, by minority population. So that's I think is unfortunate that is happening, but at some point it's good that it's happening, because people are being vocal and exposing issues that it is predatory to all of us that work. That I feel that I would avoid to apply to a company like that, for instance, because of this type of behavior. So it repels talent, it repels diversity. So the more that people are vocal about it, the better, because this industry is very small and we know each other. So yeah, so that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really bad. The notion of a toxic workplace culture is awful. Like, we spend so much of our time in work, and to think that people would feel bullied or belittled or treated in a hostile manner in any way, it's terrible. I think more particularly, it's hard for me to speak globally to game studios that I'm just not familiar with. What I would say is something we think about a lot is within our team and within the other teams we work with, is this notion of what we call a positive play mindset, which sounds goofy, but essentially the notion that we can't be out here encouraging and lecturing game teams about positivity by design and all these other kind of things if we're not walking the walk in addition to talking the talk. So I think it's really important to internally manifest what you want to externally demonstrate. And I actually don't think you get there unless people are supportive and inclusive and kind to one another in the workplace. Like, it's everybody's worked at a game studio, actually, now that I think of it, where things got done by shouting. Like, that's not new. I don't want to work at those studios, and I nor should anyone, and I think when people feel, especially when they feel like they're respected and heard and have a seat at the table, that it enables them, selfishly from my perspective, to think far more clearly about what will be good for the player. I think I think it's incredibly important. I don't think those things can coexist. I don't think ultimately you can build an inclusive, accessible, safe, fair, balanced play ecosystem for people unless you're culturally aligned with those values too.
Got it. Well, thank you both for that. I think at this point, with only less than 10 minutes left of the event, we can turn to the rest of the audience questions. And we have a lot of good ones. I don't know if both of you can see them as well, but otherwise I will just pick one. And let's see. So Natasha Miller asks, what are some examples of how you encourage positive play and how do you measure their effectiveness? And then I guess we can, who would like to go first?
I can go first if you want. Okay. Yeah, sure. It varies. So on the, one thing we've talked about here is how this is a spectrum of really different types of areas of focus. On the safety and fairness side, metrics are very easy to establish. It can be anything from, we get X number of player reports a week, and we are going to aim to have X, N number by this date, and drive down the number of complaints people have about offensive or harassing behavior. So that whole discipline is riddled with good data on people's behavior that is usually down to either player reports or moderated content being spotted and caught by the platform. It gets much harder in the more, for instance, slightly subjective zone of inclusive design, etc. I just mean it gets harder to attach metrics to it. Ultimately, our goal is to, and this is a long-term goal, our goal is that we can connect the advent of specific design elements from a positive play experience perspective to good impact to the sales of a title. That more people will come on board and play the game if it's widely known as an overall positive experience. But it's hard. It's hard to, outside of the things that are black and white, are people being harassed? Are they reporting it? Are they choosing not to come back to play because of that? Those are all very measurable impacts, and the improvement to them can be measured. when you get into some of the other areas we have, like what we refer to as balance, or certainly in inclusion and accessibility, we're developing those metrics right now. It's a lot of it is a new discipline we're building out.
Okay, yeah. In the interest of time, I guess we can all get to another question. But I don't know if Vivian, you had something else you'd like to add to that answer.
Yeah, because in design is slightly different, but that boils down to the same thing: how you collect your data and how you interpret that data. And sometimes it's very complicated because it's so entangled to the game mechanics, because you can pinpoint or put telemetry in something that is intrinsic to the experience overall. So one of the things that it's done in design is, for instance, A/B testing. So you're going to test it out, what works best on that certain situation, and you can pinpoint the best solution. So it's one of the tools that we have as designers to figure out the best way to go and interpret that.
Got it. Thank you. All right. And the next question was, are there some resources that you all would recommend to help combat disruptive behavior in games? And this is asked by Casey Clifford.
I think there is a lot of studies still, like I think University of Ohio has a few Scientific American, as I mentioned before. But all of this data that we have nowadays, since that this is a fairly new implementation for systems, you do have a few studies being done on it and can reinforce those access. But basically, I would recommend participating in communities and in game communities that also discuss this type of things. But also, I think you can find that on if it was in the diversity side, you can find some solutions towards that, like creating characters, creating solutions that brings empathy, and something similar. I can't pinpoint to you like one specific information or data where to go, because I don't remember. I know there's a Fair Alliance, where is a digital system among gaming companies that actually discuss this type of issue. So it's a good way to go.
Yeah, I can also just add that, after this event, you can find us on Twitter, and there will be more resources online that we can link you to. But yeah, okay, we have about time for one more question. Let's see. So I would just like to open it up to both of you and kind of like summarize some of these audience questions, which is just, are there some like aspects of your job that you're looking forward to exploring more in the future to come? Like what is exciting to you about this field of tackling online harassment? And Colm, you can start, and then Vivian.
Okay, sure. Okay, I'll tell this story. So when I was working in VR, and I was working in VR for 5.5 years, and it was a lot of really smart, talented people, a lot of really talented game developers, for instance. Most of the first wave of really viable VR content is being built by game developers. One of the things I ran into at the time was constantly run into what I considered to be bad faith arguments about the notion of toxicity. And at the end of the day, it was rooted in this idea. I'm not ascribing, blame to any particular group or team, but something I see in technology as an industry is this notion that scale comes first, and safety is important, but safety will come after scale. And that is incredibly, I think, wrongheaded and dangerous. The two bad faith arguments I heard most about downplaying toxicity were that the first one is toxicity is simply the tax of engaging in online play of any kind, like this sort of if you can't stand the heat, don't go in the kitchen argument. And number two, that, I just said earlier that gaming is a $200 billion, or games is a $200 billion industry. Doesn't sound like it's broken. Why are we trying to fix it? So if toxicity is a fact of life and hasn't materially affected the business, why are we stressing about it? There are three reasons, in my opinion, that I believe really strongly in. First of all, new avenues are opening up all over the place. New surfaces are opening up for people to play on. VR, AR, other immersive formats are becoming real. And, you see troubling signs of early abuse in a lot of those forums. And if you're not building your metaverse or your game or your content for safety and fairness and inclusion from the get-go, from the beginning, then you will reap what you sow. So new avenues are opening up and we have to be ready for them. Number two, growth actually is constrained. It's demonstrably true that abuse and online harassment disproportionately impacts women and people from underrepresented communities. So those people from those affected groups cite toxicity as the number one reason they don't return. And if 22% of those people stop playing games entirely because they're harassed, that's the tip of the iceberg. What about the people who never even pick up a controller? So to me, that's a vast untapped audience of people who are just like, nah, it's not for me because I've heard it's toxic. So it's a good business reason to make safe communities. And last but not least, we should aspire to do good. I used to work with a really talented game developer called Peter Hirschman, who's now the one of the game directors at Respawn. And he used to say all the time, making entertainment is a noble cause. Like, we may not be, frontline workers or first responders or whatever, but people who work in this field make stuff that brings joy to people. And I think that we have a moral responsibility for the characters and the stories and the designs we put out in the world. So that was the main thing that got me passionate and excited about this work. Is, in my mind, it's hard work, but it's low-hanging fruit. Like, we have to do this, and that's what brought me in.
Oh, and Vivian, we have time for just you to add, what you're excited for in this field, and then we can kind of say goodbye to everyone.
I am very excited to, as I mentioned before, to bring more diversity to this industry. Advocate for that for sure, because the more different voices are heard, the better we become, and we don't allow this bad reflection being the only reference for few in the gaming industry. So yeah, I think we still have a lot of work to do as a designers, as communities, as in companies, as players. But overall, like, this diversity can increase the best way to reflect the culture, and this responsibility needs to be addressed, needs to be taken on by the companies, and also shared with the players the more transparent way possible. And of course, if we are creating a better environment, why not be accessible? Why not be diverse? Why not tell different stories? Why not create best solutions or ways for players to communicate, and ways for players to celebrate and incentivize positive attitudes? So I think that's the overall is a very depth and entangled issue with culture too, but we're gonna get there.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for joining us for this event. It was lovely to talk to both of you. I learned so much, and I want to say goodbye, and let's have Jorge come back on.
Ta-ta, hello. Thank you so much to the three of you for being here tonight. Wonderful to hear your insights and to learn some of this industry. And I know that a lot of people that were participating really care about this, and you provided them some awesome insights. So thank you so much for being here. And so what we're going to do now is, if you want to watch this event again, I just want to remind you that we are live streaming it to the VPL's YouTube channel right now. So it'll be there. Candy's going to share the link so that you can see our playlist, but it's also going to be uploaded to the Vancouver Mural Festival's YouTube channel later. So you can find it. We have friends who couldn't be here tonight, but want to watch it and will find this valuable. Just send them that link, or just text us on, or send us a message on Twitter, and we'll let you know where the link is if you forget to write it down tonight. Also, we would love it if you gave us feedback about this event. Now, we're a public institution program things that work for you. So your feedback is super important so that we as a library keep getting better at this. So what we're going to do is we're going to share a link to a very quick feedback. It should take you about a minute to fill out. And I promise you that your feedback is not going to go to some dark hole of the internet. My team sits every week and we look at your comments and we try to figure out how to do our events in a better way. So please fill that out. It's really important for us. And if you want to hear and find out about more events like this, please follow the library on social for our newsletter and stay in the loop. And we post about all our events online. On that note, speaking of tomorrow night, we're hosting another Winter Arts conversation that's going to be awesome. And this one's going to be a conversation with virtual reality artists, some of whom are part of the Winter Arts Festival. And they're going to talk about how virtual reality can help increase our empathy. So that's going to be tomorrow at 7 p.m. We're putting a link in the chat as well. So hope to see some of you or all of you tomorrow here at the same time. And now I'm going to wrap up very soon. But before we wrap up, I want to remind you that our friends from Electronic Arts are hosting a conversation about career opportunities in gaming right after this. So if you're curious about getting a job in the gaming industry, don't miss this. We're going to post the Zoom details right now. There's a Zoom link and a Zoom passcode. So my suggestion is that either you're right in front of you somewhere and then click on the Zoom link right now, which will take you straight to that room. So I would do that right now, click and go to that room, but make sure you write down the passcode. Or you can copy paste that chat, put it somewhere else, and then close this Zoom window and then go to your pasted thing. If you register for the event via VPL, you're gonna get all that Zoom information in your inbox. So you got it at around 5 p.m. today or 6 p.m. today. So you look in your inbox. If you didn't register, just click there. If for some reason this is all confusing, we're gonna sit here for 5 minutes after the presenters leave to answer all your questions about that. So that's it for tonight. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for joining us from across the country and all over the US as well. We're going to keep the event, like I said, so that you can click on the links and get to know each other. But in the meantime, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Vivian. It's been a pleasure being with you tonight.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.